Always small groups of people that change the world. So
Yes!
let's see if we can do that. We're going to start off with one of my favorite local musicians. I consider them a folk music legend here in Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas. Kelly Mulholland from Still on the Hill. Awesome person, is dedicated to peace. He's been working his heart out for a long time. Please welcome Kelly Mulholland.
Hey. Thank you, Abel, and thank you, Abel, also for getting this together, as well as Dick Bennett. You know, a couple of my heroes around here. I'm going to start off with a little ancient history. I'm going to play a song that I wrote the very day that we invaded Iraq in 1991. So that was Desert Storm, not the second round, not the third round, or the fourth round, but this is the first round. And you know, you might wonder why I chose that song, but while there's some obvious differences, there's also some obvious connections. And in one way, when we did that, we opened Pandora's box, and we still haven't figured out how to close it. And you could say that I think that Korea could be equally as devastating and as impossible to resolve. So that's why I thought maybe this would be. And plus, I had also this song. You know, when I wrote it, I thought it would probably have a very short shelf life. Excuse me, short. And but I think it's starting to become accurate, maybe. Strangely enough. It's called Talking Desert Storm here. Well, who would have guessed how the whole world's fate would have changed when Saddam invaded Kuwait? There'll be a forever arguing the circumstances, but it seems the Emir had been taking chances, fixing prices, and doing a little bit of slandering. Well, where there's oil, you'll always find that Uncle Sam has found the time to make a few friends and reserve some places for Air Force runways and Army bases. Well, just in case.
Yeah, thanks. I just wish.
Never know.
Glad to see you.
Gotta keep your eyes on free enterprise. With the Russians consumed by their own shrinking borders, Bush thought he'd claim him a new world order. He'd show all the world all his fabulous toys, and just for good measure, add 500,000 boys. The New World Police, gonna liberate the Emir. So Bush set out on his heartfelt mission, had to pay off the leaders of a world coalition. Had to make us look like the world defender, because some Americans could still remember that Vietnam, it didn't go so well. We'd need good relations. He even bought off the United Nations. But he still couldn't sell it, not for jobs, not for freedom. He's Iraqi, he's a brain of for a line, and he could feed them. And appealing to our hearts from the pit of his soul, Bush finally found one that would fly in the poles. And that was Hitler. Yeah, Hitler. That flew. And this time, he's nuclear. And so it goes that a dead broke nation, billions in debt with a looming recession. Like a mad dog cornered and rearing to fight, our F-18 scream off in the night, and the war had begun. Stay tuned to your TV set. And if it ever ends by, it may come to be by the loaded dice of history. That with all our connections, sooner or later we'll find them Iraqis another dictator. There we'll stand on our new claimed soil, talking democracy and selling all their oil for millions and billions till it's all gone.
Still relevant, Kelly.
Oh my God.
That was wonderful, Kelly. Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to have a prayer by Pastor Roy Lennington from the Spirit of Peace Church. Please give a warm welcome to Roy.
Would you join with me in prayer? Creating God, parent of all humanity, maker of the universe, we pray together. We come together in a common goal of peace for all. We come together as a community seeking your guidance in our decision making. We come together to ask that you guide the words and actions of our world leaders. We come together to ask you to help us rid the world of inhumane weapons of destruction, to promote understanding and acceptance of each other, and to guide our journeys toward a place of creative harmony. We come at a time when the world is full of violence and destruction, a time when innocent people, especially children, live in fear and face death at the hands of those who seek to divide us. We come at a time when the world is full of competition instead of cooperation, a time when we face inequality instead of justice. We pray that you teach us how to reach out to each other, how to reach across borders and oceans and our self-made walls of division. We pray for the healing of people faced with destruction and havoc of our own making. We pray for an end of weapons that are so powerful that we have a difficult time imagining the destruction and death that they may cause. God, Holy Parent of this world, we pray that you would inspire us to create a peaceful world, like the world that you created for us. Help us to call our leaders to accountability and to remind them that more weapons do not bring peace. Make us a peaceful people in a peaceful world. Amen.
Thanks so much, Roy. Okay, next, I guess it's my turn to give a speech. I'm before you, right, Art? Okay. I'm going to go first.
I prefer that.
Okay, so this is my speech here. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming. We're gathered here today to celebrate momentous progress for the nuclear weapons abolition movement and to call for peace. Most significantly, 122 nations have adopted the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at the United Nations. This is a poignant moment, considering the very first United Nations resolution was a call for nuclear disarmament and a nuclear-free world. This historic achievement for peace deserves the highest of praise. Please give it up for the many leaders that made this happen. It's important to acknowledge real leadership is being demonstrated because this landmark treaty was approved under intense pressure from nuclear-armed nations. Yet the fierce resistance by nuclear nations, including the United States, is a testament to its true power. Secondly, we're gathered here today to celebrate the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN. The Nobel Committee chose ICAN for its work to draw attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons and for its groundbreaking efforts to achieve a treaty-based prohibition of such weapons. Let's give it up for the Nobel Prize Committee for this decision and the countless ICAN activists that worked so hard to make this a reality. This treaty and ICAN's Nobel Prize have now given the nuclear weapons abolition movement incredible momentum. Wind in the sails for the peace movement. So, what's next? None of the nuclear-armed nations support this treaty and appear determined to fiercely cling to their soon-to-be illegal arsenals. What now becomes most critical is continuing to raise awareness, progressing public opinion, and pressuring our representatives. Corner them. Make them take a position, a clear yes or no. Over 80% of the American public wants a nuclear weapons-free world, so we must demand that be represented in our representatives. Yeah. And not only contacting our representatives we have now in Congress, we have Womack and Cotton and Boozman, all relatively clear warmongers. They want war and they don't seem to have ears open to peace, so it's almost more important to talk to the people running for Congress. And there's actually two fairly decent candidates, I think, running for Congress in the 3rd District. Not just the Democrat Josh Mahoney, but we actually have a Republican challenger in the primary against Womack named Rob Ryersey. And he's actually really progressive, and he's said some very good things about peace. So we need to talk to these people and get them to take a firm, clear position so we know where they stand. And so if you disagree with Womack and his warmongering, you actually have two chances to replace him. You can vote in, I think it's March, the Republican primary, and you can have a really progressive Republican replace him automatically. Womack will be out of a job. Or you can vote again in November for the Democrat if you want. So you have two chances to replace a hardcore warmonger in the 3rd District. In terms of raising awareness, we must also face some other uncomfortable truths. Previously, we made progress towards nuclear disarmament with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which the U.S. signed. Nuclear stockpiles were reduced, and many nations agreed to not build nuclear weapons. However, we took a huge leap backwards with all of the past 3 war on terror administrations, which all violated the NPT treaty. Fear of terrorism from 9/11 is being used as a tool to justify not only erosion of our constitutional rights domestically, but it has given them a justification to violate international treaties. First, the Bush administration labeled Iraq, Iran, and North Korea the axis of evil. Then, the administration lied about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and connections to 9/11 to justify a war which UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said was illegal. And it is. Indeed, it was a war of aggression, the supreme international war crime according to the Nuremberg Charter. As a side note, this war cost trillions and killed over 1 million people, many of them innocent men, women, and children. And it tilled the soil and planted the seeds for ISIS and civil war in Iraq and elsewhere. Indeed, as an analysis of State Department statistics found, terrorism has increased 6,500% since the war on terror began. Our drone bombings all across the Middle East, those are arguably in violation of international law too. Our drone bombings and wars across the Middle East are doing the exact opposite of what politicians claim they're doing. We're actually manufacturing terrorism. Furthermore, the last 3 administrations have all violated NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, by all threatening first strike nuclear attack. All 3 of these administrations said, and these are their words, all options are on the table. All 3 of them have said that. And it sounds innocuous. And they've said that towards Iran and North Korea, the other 2 axes of evil that we haven't attacked. Hopefully never, but not yet. To many, these euphemisms are misunderstood. But for those that study foreign policy, this is well-known threat of nuclear attack. And it breaches NPT. According to the nuclear treaty that we signed, you're not even allowed to threaten to attack someone with nuclear bombs. That's a violation of the treaty. And Trump has now made these violations more honest, if you will, by eliminating the euphemism and openly threatening nuclear fire and fury like the world has never seen. That is also a violation of the treaty. Threats of offensive nuclear attack as a tool of foreign policy were unheard of before these past 3 administrations, and they even make Ronald Reagan look like a peacenik who once said, "A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought." Stop and think about the cruel, sick irony here. We're saying to Iran and North Korea, we think you're a danger because you're trying to build nuclear weapons, so we're going to attack you with nuclear weapons. It's mind-boggling nonsense. The reality is that it's not about defense, but power, hegemony, and empire, which we'll return to. Despite the U.S. having enough nuclear warheads to destroy the world multiple times, the previous administration further breached the central NPT Non-Proliferation Treaty provision of disarmament. One of the 3 core pillars of the Non-Proliferation Treaty was disarmament. And they violated that by approving a $1 trillion modernization of the nuclear arsenal. And Trump not only agreed to continue this violation, but a recent NBC report stated that Trump would like to expand the nuclear arsenal tenfold. So we have 7,000 nuclear weapons now. Trump wants 70,000 nuclear weapons. As if destroying the world 10 times isn't enough, you know. As Moyers and company pointed out, isn't it rather odd that America's largest single public expenditure scheduled for the coming decades received no attention in the presidential debates? Not one mainstream media, that hosts these presidential debates, not one of them brought up the $1 trillion upgrade of the nuclear arsenal. So why does the United States need to spend $1 trillion on nuclear bombs when we already have 7,000? Secondarily, why is it politicians, so divided on domestic issues, can always find unity in spending trillions upon trillions for endless war? It was similar in the Roman Republic. One faction offered more benefits to Roman citizens, while the other faction was more purely just for the richest few. However, both factions were united in maintaining the Roman Empire. This is the massive elephant in the room. Mainstream media rarely allows us to understand this issue of empire. Reputable academic critics of empire like Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, or Chalmers Johnson are not permitted to speak in mainstream media. These issues are not brought up in presidential debates, just like the $1 trillion arsenal upgrade. Some of you may be thinking, we're not an empire, that sounds crazy. And I could tell you about the 800 or 1,000 foreign military bases encircling our planet, but instead, I want to offer more compelling testimony. Please Google Smedley Butler if you don't know him. Highly decorated Marine Corps general. Read his short book that's free online called War is a Racket. General Butler described the nature of the U.S. empire well, and from a point of view few have the opportunity to experience. General Butler said this: I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of the country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico safe, especially Tampico, for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National Citibank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefits of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916. In China, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back upon it, I feel I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. So, you see, the nature of American empire is not like the standard colonialism. Standard colonialism of the British, French, or Spanish empires consisted in militaries taking over lands of weaker peoples to steal their resources and making explicit claims of ownership. In our form of empire, we don't say we explicitly own other nations, but we exercise other forms of control. We send in militaries for corporate interests and install puppet governments. Puppet governments must agree to our corporate imperialist agenda. If they attempt to cut their puppet strings, that's precisely when we apply economic constraints to control them, or we overthrow their governments by clandestine coups or outright invasions, and there's something like 50 governments that we've interfered through coup or invasions and overthrows since World War II. And then we ensure a more favorable government is installed, whether it's an explicit dictator or a pseudo-democracy. Remember that the next time a politician lies about fighting for freedom and democracy. If America was sincere about wanting democracy for everyone else, we wouldn't have overthrown multiple democracies and installed multiple brutal dictators. And the prototypical example is Chile in the 1970s. We destroyed one of the most advanced South American democracies of Allende and installed one of the most brutal dictators in South American history with Pinochet. Now you may be thinking, why does he keep talking about empire instead of nuclear weapons? Well, this event is also a call for a greater peace movement. We need comprehensive understanding so we can create comprehensive solutions. Banning nuclear weapons is only one of the biggest pieces, is one of the biggest pieces of the peace puzzle, but we need to find all the pieces if we want to assemble deep, lasting peace. We mustn't make the mistake of thinking the nuclear ban treaty is enough. And I'll quote physicist and one of my peace superhero, Joseph Blatt, in his Nobel Peace Prize speech to make this point. And some of y'all may have heard some of this in the Hiroshima event speech I did. But if you get a chance, look up the documentary, The Strangest Dream. It's free online, and it goes over Rotblatt's beautiful history. Joseph Rotblatt, he was, of all the brilliant scientists working on the Manhattan Project to build the nuclear bomb, he was the only scientist to quit. And after he quit because he was told by General Groves, the head of the Manhattan Project, that the bomb wasn't to defeat Hitler, it was to cow the Soviets. And so he quit and subsequently became an incredible hero for peace, working towards disarmament in a very powerful way. But Rotblat said this: "I've argued we must eliminate nuclear weapons. While this would remove the immediate threat, it will not provide permanent security. Nuclear weapons cannot be disinvented. Even in a nuclear weapon-free world, should any of the great powers become involved in a military confrontation, they could rebuild their arsenals. The danger of the ultimate catastrophe would still exist. The only way to prevent it is to abolish war altogether. We must learn to resolve disputes by means other than military confrontation, and it will require developing a new loyalty, a loyalty to mankind. We have to become world citizens. And prospects for this new loyalty are now better because fantastic advances in modern communication techniques enable us to learn instantly about events in every part of the globe. Technology is driving us together, and we are becoming like one family." And Rotblat wrote that decades ago, back before we had smartphones and all this. So the ability of our interconnection and our access to information now, we can fact check people using the internet. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of access to information and connectivity we never had. And it's easy to be pessimistic and think these problems are too big. The system is too corrupt, and peace is impossible. Yet that is precisely what people told me years ago, when I started working on drug law reform. Numerous people said Arkansas is too backwards to ever legalize medical cannabis, but we proved them wrong. Surely many people also once thought that nuclear weapons would never be banned, yet here we are. We now have a great reason for inspiration and a great reason for hope for peace. We must imagine the possibility of peace and resist despair. And I'll conclude again, as I did in my last speech with Martin Luther King. It's just too good not to repeat. Martin Luther King said, "I refuse to accept despair or the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events around him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of thermonuclear destruction. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." Thank you. A little long-winded, but I had a lot to say. Next, I want to welcome up, let me make sure I got this right, 1 second. I want to welcome up our keynote speaker, which is Bill Williams. He's a Marine Corps veteran, disabled Marine Corps veteran of the Vietnam War. And I know he's been working really hard to help make the world a better place for a long time. Please give it up for Bill Williams.
Thank you very much, sir.
I think I'll go back here.
Well, don't you know that Abel would steal my thunder, wouldn't he? Yeah. Smedley D. Butler. One of my favorite Marines of all time. His only real offense was that he told the truth the way he saw it. And it cost him in his career. Major General was a pretty good deal, but, he could have gone further. But his problem was he always told the truth. Of course, he didn't have Abel stealing his lines. I see a lot of familiar faces out here, and it's good to see you again. If you've kind of settled down in your chair for another one of my long-winded recitations from a script, I'm going to disappoint you. For the first time, and possibly the last time, I'm going to try to give you the result of what I've done lately in terms of notes. And thinking about that, I kind of feel like a baritone who knows his vocal range is something less than an octave, who's been asked to sing the national anthem at an NFL game. He would have been hoping everybody was just being pissed off at the guys on their knees and didn't pay any attention to him. I looked first at the history of anti-war sentiment in this country. And there is a difference between anti-war and peace. In the Civil War, there were a couple of important anti-war movements. One was in the streets of the cities, especially New York, where people didn't want to be drafted because they didn't feel like this was their war to be troubled with. And some of them got killed for it, but not enough, so they drafted the rest and killed them. The other was the Copperheads. They were Southern folks who moved north and just didn't want to be troubled again because it was economically bad for their enterprise. Now, that's not peace. Just like the empire is not really an empire. Well, I don't know how to tell you that. It's not. It's worse. But we have the opportunity to fix it. I'm getting ahead of myself. See, I should have stuck to my notes. I was kind of disappointed because I haven't seen a single person here wearing a peace sign except the old codger in the white hat over there. Does anybody know him? Stand up and show us your peace sign there, fella. Yeah, right on your shirt. Thank you very much. Thank you. I figured I could get away with it. I could run faster than him, but not for as long. That peace sign was first a matter of public comment in 1958. It showed up in newspaper pictures in Britain, a place, though, where they managed to stay ahead of us a lot, especially in important matters like software and peace. There was a 4-day march from London to a place, I'll refer here, Aldermaston, which was home of a research facility for the Defense Department in Britain. And in that march, some of these folks were wearing that thing. Look, my favorite singer's got one too. Yeah. That's the peace sign. That's sort of been our logo. It's sort of been sometimes our inspiration. It's been the source of more than one fisticuff. But it's a thing worth remembering. It's a thing worth revering. I did some research that probably I shouldn't have done because I have PTSD and I tend to get really weird when I get a lot of bad news all at once. But I did research just the Americans who won the Nobel Peace Prize during my lifetime. And the first one was Cordell Hull. I know Dick remembers him. Dick was probably a voter back then. And he was an American diplomat who was one of the founding members of the United Nations. Very worthy sort of fellow. But next were, in 1946, a couple of folks that you probably never did hear of. John Raleigh Mott. He founded the YMCA, an organization that was intended to give youngsters the kind of training that you would like to have your kids have. But with him was a much more interesting lady, I thought, Emily Green Balch. She was with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She was regarded as a dangerous radical from 1935 on by the government of the United States. Many of us here would love to be regarded as dangerous radicals, I know. But we'll keep working at it. 47 was the American Friends Service Council, the Quakers. Some of my favorite folks, probably yours too. 50 was Ralph Bunche. Now, Mr. Bunche is referred to in the Nobel website, which incidentally is nobelprize.org. You ought to go look at it. He is referred to as the first colored recipient. I'm sure that was intended to be sensitive and complimentary. On the other hand, he was also chosen because apparently somebody at the UN picked him for a suicide mission. They sent him to the Mideast to serve as a negotiator for peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians after the Israelis had assassinated his predecessor. He was more successful though, and he got a big prize for it. George Marshall, who really authored the plan to build Europe back after World War II. Linus Pauling, he's an interesting fellow in a particularly good way. As a chemist, he solely by himself won the prize for chemistry in 1954, and then by himself he won the prize for peace in 1962. He's a good guy to train your kids to know about. He's a very smart fellow. 64 was a Georgia guy named King, Martin Luther King Jr. Probably that's all I need to say. Norman Borlaug, probably the younger folks here don't know anything about Norman Borlaug, but he developed varieties of wheat and maize in particular that would be much more productive in third world countries. And so he was a guy who was sort of obliquely working for peace, but he was doing it. Now, the next awardee, he gets particular, well, he brings irony to the job. He was the author of the bombing campaign that sent B-52s over North Vietnam, especially Hanoi, and tried to bomb them into submission, while at the same time he was negotiating for a truce in Vietnam. Henry Kissinger, certainly not my choice for the Peace Prize, but he wasn't the choice of everybody on the committee either. Two of them resigned as a result of the choice. Amnesty International, they are described by the committee as a light in the darkness. The International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War. That's a long title. They won in 1985. Think about them because I'll come back to them in a minute. A lady named Jody Williams in 1997, I wish I were kin to her. She was one of the hard workers in the international campaign. That's okay. It has a mind of its own. It'll walk back after a while. She was in the international campaign to ban landmines. Yeah, you better give me my hat back after you stole my lines. God, what a guy. Thank you. Jimmy Carter in 2002, far and away the best ex-president we ever had. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that was 2007. A guy named Albert Gore, Tennessee boy. 2009, Barack Obama. And now here we are in 2017. The International Committee to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Beatrice Finn is their director. They are an organization made up of organizations. And one of them is that Boston organization I warned you about a minute ago. A good American organization. The International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. A long title, but one that you gotta love. Only a bunch of doctors could come up with something as wordy as that. All of those things, they make you think, wow, all of these great, famous people that are doing this great stuff. And they are, but, you know, like the current winner, the Aussies, they're not new on the scene, boys and girls. They've been 10 years in the making. Some of these organizations have been around a lot longer than that. We make 2 steps forward. Sometimes we get 1 step back, 2 steps back. Sometimes we lose our buds and have to start all over. The point is that we have people who are willing to devote their lives to our cause. People who work not just for the occasional speech where some deadbeat steals their lines, but people who work every day doing the hard stuff. Those are the people that can get the job done. We've got to believe it can be done because the alternative is unthinkable. We cannot accept the notion that we will fail. So I would urge you, when you see people like Kelly over there, Gladys, Dick Bennett, he's the granddaddy of us all, well, hopefully just figuratively, and when you see him, give him an extra hug and tell him thanks. And when you see an old vet, don't tell him thank you for your service. Tell him peace. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bill. And I actually made a mistake there. I was supposed to have Art come speak prior, but we'll go ahead and welcome up Art Hobson. He's a professor of physics, a retired professor of physics from the University of Arkansas. And strangely enough, I came to know of Art before I ever met him because I took a physics class at the university, and the textbook for the class was written by Art. And it's a special textbook because he makes sure to apply it to physics and human affairs, I think. So he really makes it applicable to, you know, society and environmental issues and things like that. So please welcome up Art Hobson.
Okay, now I'm moving to the right. Am I over here?
Yes. Good, I'm out of the sun. And you can bet that the textbook has a chapter devoted to nuclear weapons questions, nuclear war issues and stuff. We need to be talking about this stuff, I'll tell you. Sorry, I should have warned you. Thanks for being here, everybody. All you good people here. I'm really delighted to be out here with you. Thanks for inviting me, Dick Bennett, and Abel Tomlinson. Thanks a bunch, really glad to be here. We're here to celebrate a really fantastic event. It's really good news. I think it's the best news for peace that we've heard for years. I really think this resolution is going someplace. There are two things going on here. One is the UN treaty to abolish nuclear weapons, and the other is the Nobel Peace Prize was given to ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It was given to this very fine group for supporting that treaty and spreading the word about it. And between the two, I think we really can do this. And I think we're celebrating today the start of the end of nuclear weapons, the abolition of nuclear weapons. I really do. It's a very important event. And Abel mentioned that 122 have now ratified, no, not ratified it, but signed it.
I think 122 passed it in the General Assembly, and 50 have to ratify it before it becomes law.
Yeah, it was passed by the General, this UN treaty was passed by the General Assembly and then was opened for signing and ratification, and immediately about 53 nations signed up, and it was real quick. Something over 50, a little over 50 signed up right away, but they have to have 50 ratify it also. That's a harder process. That has to go through the Congress or whatever, some permitting process in each one of those countries. So that's going to take longer, but on about the third or fourth day, already 3 countries had ratified it. One of those happened to be the Vatican that ratified it. I think many more are going to be ratifying it soon. And what I gathered from what Abel said was 122 have already signed it, and that's quite possible that it could be up that far already. I really hope it is. It was up over 50, and it's going to be over 100, and it's going to get to 150. A lot of nations are going to want to sign this. The ratification process, for technical reasons, will just take a little bit longer. But we're on a really good path here, and you really want to encourage it. It's kind of a cliche to say that we can wipe out civilization with nuclear weapons. It certainly is true. In a way, we can't say it too much, so it's not a bad cliche. But let me fill in the specifics just a little bit. You might have heard this before. I've made this point before, but let's just consider one Trident submarine for a moment. This is part of our nuclear force. On one of these submarines, there are 24 ICBM missiles. Each one of those missiles carries 8 warheads, 8 H-bombs. So this is a test. How many H-bombs are there on one Trident submarine?
Almost 200.
It's 24 missiles, each one with 8 warheads. What's 20? Yeah, but you gotta think through those things. What's 25 times 8?
192.
Okay, there we go. 25 times 8 is 200. But you only want 24 times 8, so it's 192. Got to use your brains if we're going to end nuclear war, and your hearts. It really takes both, and life is a matter of working it out between those two sources of life, really, our brains and our hearts. So this one Trident submarine carries 192 H-bombs. Each one has a firepower of 100 kilotons of TNT equivalent. In other words, 100,000 tons of TNT is the explosive power of one of those H-bombs. And each one of the eight bombs on each missile is independently targetable, as they say. They can go to 8 different specific targets. So you can actually, if you want to, knock out 192 cities with this. Because 100 did I say megatons? Kilotons. It's 100 kilotons for each one. It's worth, each one of these warheads is worth 7 Hiroshimas. That's 7 times the bomb size that destroyed Hiroshima. So each one of these 192 H-bombs can destroy a city, no question. I don't think the human race or civilization would survive the destruction of 192 cities all over the world. And that could happen with one Trident submarine. We got 4 Trident submarines under the water all the time. They're invulnerable. Nobody's going to be able to knock them out. They're under the water and nobody knows exactly where they are. We have 18 Trident submarines in all in the sea-based leg of the triad. 18 of those submarines that can do all that, each one of them. And it's a triad, so the second part of the triad is the bombers, the B-52s and the B-2 bombers that carry nuclear weapons. And the third part of the triad is the Minuteman missiles, the land-based ICBMs that are up scattered all over the Midwest, with another 450 H-bombs on them. So yes, you can certainly destroy civilization with this. Why we need all that firepower, I can't imagine, even if you believe in deterrence and that you need all this to keep somebody else from attacking us. Why we need all that, I can't imagine. Get up my notes here, because I want to quote one of my best friends, at least in my imagination, because I've read so much and I like this guy so much. Albert Einstein says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." But we're not doing that substantially new manner of thinking, unfortunately, not for the most part. We still act like cowboys out on the prairie and shoot rounds. And it certainly sounds like that between 2 gentlemen that have been shooting it out recently, Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim. I can't imagine why we have let things come to this pass, why we have let these 2 men get us to the point that we're at today, because we're on the brink of nuclear war today. We really are. It's a very tense situation right now. So let me tell you just a little bit about that. South Korea and the United States forces have these war games twice a year where they surround North Korea and they act like they're going to invade North Korea. It's a preparation for invasion. We've been doing it for a couple of decades at least, twice a year, where both armies line up, the now South Korean and American army lines up along the border and acts like they're going to invade the border. They don't cross the border, but they get up to it, and they're all set to go to invade North Korea. Plus, we send the Navy and our Air Force up along that border and also along the ocean shores of North Korea. And latest one, just a few weeks ago, these war games, we went up further with our bombers and our fighters up further north along their coast on the Pacific than we ever have before. This is very menacing to North Korea, very menacing to Kim. Kim is a dictator. He really wants to hold on to his power. And he's afraid of being attacked. And he has threatened to shoot down those bombers that fly too close to his borders. And that's just in the last few weeks. We were very close to something very dangerous, and yet they're both shooting off their mouths like little boys. We have not got this new way of thinking. We don't have it figured out. There's a short-term solution to this in Korea. Short-term. It's called a dual freeze. China suggested it. Russia suggested it. A lot of Americans have suggested it. Trump doesn't like it at all. And Kim, he says maybe he'd talk about it. It sounds more possible. I think we could talk about this and we could get this. The dual freeze idea is if they stop testing their missiles, we'll stop having our war games around their perimeter. Sounds simple enough to me. I can't imagine why we need to have those war games. God knows we're prepared with everything under the sun to attack North Korea if they just lift one finger the wrong way. That's the short-term solution. We need to be talking about that with North Korea, and I think we can talk about it. But it's just a short-term solution. In the long-term solution, there's no doubt in my mind, and in the minds of a lot of people, such as a couple of establishment figures, to mention George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, and this other guy, Henry Kissinger, has already been mentioned here. They both believe the same thing. They think we need to abolish nuclear weapons entirely all over the world, including the United States. So this is not some harebrained scheme. This is something the United Nations behind. Maybe 122 nations in the world are already explicitly signed up for it. And we can put this thing across, and we do need to. There really is hope here to abolish nuclear weapons. So get behind this. You can do some specific things. Don't just shrug your shoulders and say, well, that's good speeches, or whatever. But what can I do? You can sign up with ICAN for one very important thing. There are all sorts of organizations that worry about nuclear weapons programs. Another one of my favorites is the Union of Concerned Scientists. You don't have to be a scientist to join that and to get involved. They're very concerned about nuclear weapons, and they have a big branch of their operations devoted to nuclear weapons issues. But ICAN is the place you ought to go. Google on the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or just Google on ICAN. And there'll be a sign-up place, and they say on their internet site that by subscribing to this list, by signing up on their website, you are going to receive campaign updates and calls to action. Also ideas and inspiring stories about our worldwide campaign. So get behind this campaign and really support it. And on their website, they have the words, "Together we can ban nuclear weapons." So let's all say that right now. Ready? Together we can ban nuclear weapons. One more time, as loud as possible, because you got to speak up loudly if you're going to ban nuclear weapons. Together we can ban nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Art. Okay, our last thing we have is one more song by Kelly Mulholland. Again, please give it up once more for Kelly.
Thank you, Abel. That was very inspiring. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Bill. Gosh, very nice. I thought we tried to end on a positive note with a little bit of optimism, like Art managed to do as well. But a song also reminds us that we have obstacles. It's not a song, it's not an obscure song, it's a song that everybody here knows. So maybe you can help me sing it. Pete Seeger. Thank you again, Abel, and Dick, for making this happen. This is great. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the heat, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer about love between my brothers and my sisters. Oh, over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out a warning, I'd ring about love between my brothers and my sisters. Oh, over this land. Man, I need to hear a little bit more of you guys. A little bit more, you know the words here. Song. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing about a love between my brothers and my sisters. Oh, over this land. Now I like this verse because this puts it all together. Well, I have a hand, and I have a bell, and I have a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters. Oh, over this land, all over this land, all over this land, all over this land. Peace in the world, or the world in pieces. Abel, you have any last words?
Thank you. Just want to say thanks everybody for coming, and give it up for all the organizations that got behind this. Even though we only organized 1 week, there's a group I sort of created. It's just mostly online, but I try to organize things. The Arkansas Nonviolence Alliance, the Omni Center, which is an awesome organization here in Fayetteville. Also, we were able to get the Arkansas Coalition for Peace and Justice and the Women's Action for New Direction, or WAND, of Arkansas. And I invited them to speak, but they couldn't make it. They all endorsed us. So I just want to say thank them. That's it. Thank you, everybody.